still I haven't finished my coffee already, but we already started. Nice one. Welcome everybody. Welcome to the next Backupmonster Show. My guest this time will be the Tytus Kurek. So let's just bring the Tytus online. Hello, Tytus.
Hello, Paweł. Thanks for inviting me here.
Yeah, pleasure to meet you. And we need to start with this funny thing because we are both Polish, but we didn't have.
Right.
So, dzień dobry.
Dzień dobry, Paweł.
Dzień
Dzień dobry
dobry.
słuchaczom.
Tytus is from south of Poland, Rzeszów area. We just, have some chit chat before the session because I was born in Sunbeam, so we had actually 100 kilometers between our, let's say, cities. So it's quite short distance if we are talking right now about the worldwide business, and we have people who watching us for all over the world. So if you just put the information from which country or which city you are watching us, I will be grateful. But I want to start the story because we are both Polish, but we met actually this year in Canada. So we've been on OpenInfra. So both teams are, let's say, we are joined to the community. The Canonical is a huge contributor in the OpenInfra infrastructure. We'll talk about it later. And I just short story. I came to the Canonical booth and I asked, okay, I would like to speak with somebody who has great knowledge about the OpenStack environment, and because we would like to study the cooperation between both companies, so the Storware and the Canonical. And they said, actually, we have a few folks around, and both folks were Polish, so it was really funny that I need to go to the Canada to meet the people responsible for the OpenStack community, and one of these people is Tytus. So just small, let's say, chit chat from my side. Like I said, I'm thrilled to have you here. Tytus, few words and introductory from your side. What's your role in a Canonical, and you can tell also a few things about Rzeszów, I guess.
Absolutely. So that was an interesting experience indeed. Going to completely other part of the world to meet people from Poland, right? So yeah, the OpenInfra Summit this year was kind of an interesting type of event. But before we get there, just to briefly introduce myself. So my role at Canonical is being a product manager for OpenStack. Obviously, OpenStack is one of the most major products that Canonical has in its portfolio. It's something that we've been doing for years. So I basically help to drive the vision and the strategy and the roadmap for the product. I actually don't live in Rzeszów. I live close to Rzeszów, like 30 kilometers away from Rzeszów. I have a house like next to the forest, so it's like a very good place to be based if you're working in the IT industry and you can embrace like a remote working culture as we have at Canonical, right? Like we're mostly remote company with people working for us from various parts of the world. We obviously come together to see each other in some places from time to time because you need to maintain like this physical connection. But like we're mostly remote. We're remote first.
Remote first. What's actually your story behind the OpenStack technology? Yes, because when I started to discover the OpenStack, it was like 5 years ago that we decided, okay, let's go because we started in KVM in 2015. Then natively we started to talk about the OpenStack project, and to be honest, after these 5 years of knowing the community, I still learning this community and this specific product itself. But I will tell the audience later on. But I'm interested more how it was your story before you came to the Canonical.
Absolutely. So I started my career in 2009, and I started in one of American corporations that had its office in Krakow, which is the place where I studied, where I went to the university. This is where I graduated. So before I even got familiar with OpenStack, like OpenStack did not exist at that time. Obviously, that was 2009, and OpenStack was only established like a year later. But the majority of the infrastructure that we had at that time in this company was based on Ubuntu, which was kind of extraordinary, because if you think about that, Ubuntu obviously existed since 2004, but was mostly considered like Linux for developers at that time, not necessarily for production. Well, at that time we had the whole infrastructure based on Ubuntu. But obviously later on, we've started exploring various other data center technologies, such as VMware, for example. I think this is a kind of a natural evolution path for every company who's been maintaining their IT assets. Is like they used to have some VMware estates in the past, then they embraced the cloud computing paradigm. Some of them went to AWS or Azure or Google, right? Some of them tried building that on-prem, right? So this was the direction that the company I worked for took at that time, and that was back in 2014, was to try to build their own cloud. And obviously the choice was only there was only one possible choice, right? That was OpenStack. There obviously has been some other cloud technologies around, like CloudStack, for example, or OpenNebula, but those have never gained dominance in the market, right? The penetration was relatively low, and we couldn't see any kind of success stories coming from the market for those other technologies, right? So that's we decided to try OpenStack, and that was my first time where I actually got exposed into OpenStack. And then I was assigned, as a lead for this project. I was responsible for building the first cloud in that company, and my first experience with OpenStack was not that positive. Why? Well, because it is so much complex, right?
Yeah, this is what I wanted to ask, is because the first touch in the early days of the OpenStack, it means a huge amount of the work. Yes, the
Exactly.
complexity, it's massive, especially when you're comparing to the VMware or the other let's say commercial vendors. I don't want to, let's say, looking for the disadvantage, but the entry level to go into the technology, it's much more difficult and demands more experience here.
You're absolutely right. Like if you take a look how the first experience with platforms like VMware looks like, it's usually pretty straightforward. It was obviously not like that with OpenStack. And my way of learning things is that I need to first do everything manually myself, right? So there was already like a bunch of technologies that would enable you to kind of jump into the OpenStack ecosystem relatively quickly. But my approach is always like try yourself manually first, like learn through through your own experience, through your own journey, right? So uh, I decided, like, the first cloud I'm going to build, I'll build that manually, and I build that following the official installation instructions. And it took me 3 months. It took me 3 months to get like my first cloud up and running, which was like really steep learning curve, right? So that's how my first experience with OpenStack obviously looked like, and it didn't change much until 2016. So in 2016, I decided to change the job, and I've been already, monitoring Canonical for a while, because I had, all of this experience with Ubuntu, and this experience was really positive, and I was admiring this company for its working culture, the values, and the operating system that it produces, right? So when I joined in 2016, and I joined like as a cloud consultant, that was the first time I got exposed to Canonical's OpenStack distribution. It's called Charmed OpenStack. And as a part of my onboarding process, I was assigned with a task so that I basically spin up a cloud in a week in a lab. And I was like, no way, this is not going to work, right? Like, I know OpenStack, I know how complex it is, right? Like, it's not possible. And I was so much surprised to see that it is actually possible. There are ways to tame this complexity around OpenStack. So that was my second experience with OpenStack. What we're working on right now at Canonical is kind of designing the third generation experience that will hopefully help us to lower the entry barrier even more.
We'll come back in a second to it, but you said so the third experience. So the first one weeks, the second
The
is
second
a
one,
week.
it works.
Yeah, it works. And you mentioned that, and I'm quite sure that not everybody knowing the Canonical as a company who leads the Ubuntu, because everybody knows the Ubuntu as a name as a product. But not everybody realized that Ubuntu equals Canonical company as a people, as a culture, etc. Could you a little bit discover and tell a few words about the Canonical itself? So how big the company is and what's the major products these days from the
Sure,
Canonical
absolutely.
offering?
So that's a very good point, and we face that very often. So that whenever we go to conferences or just talk to customers or meet people at the events like this one, for example, is that everyone knows Ubuntu. Like everyone in tech knows Ubuntu because it's hard not to know Ubuntu, right? Like it is that the most popular Linux distribution is just a fact, right? Especially when it comes to like developer workstations, containers or virtual machines running, in the biggest public cloud environments in the world, like the majority of those workloads are underpinned by Ubuntu, right? And this is usually like one of the first places where people get exposure to Linux and the entire Linux ecosystem, because it is Linux for humans, right? Like this is how it was designed for, and this is what it continues to be. It's like Linux that is easily consumable by human beings. But two facts about Canonical is that, first of all, like we're not just, so first of all, like we are the company behind Ubuntu. We drive roadmaps for Ubuntu. We contribute the biggest amount of resources to the Ubuntu project, and we sponsor its development, right? So we are the company behind Ubuntu. But Ubuntu is not the only thing that we are doing as a company. In fact, like we are trying to cover the entire spectrum of open source, right? From infrastructure up to applications, from public clouds through data centers to the edge and IoT. And our mission is to deliver secure, trusted open source that can be used by enterprises at any scale in various market sectors. And in fact, Ubuntu is a production Linux distribution as well. It is a commercial Linux distribution. It can be commercial, like it is free of charge, of course. Like it can be used for free by everyone on the planet, and this will always remain our mission, to bring Ubuntu to everyone, to bring Linux to everyone. But in fact, there is a commercial add-on on top of Ubuntu that people are not usually aware, which is called Ubuntu Pro, that basically provides like extra support and security advantages as typically required by customers in the enterprise sector. So it can be used in production,
Yeah,
and
so you can
it
easily
is used.
start with the open source and then grab the pro version through the maintenance and save your butt in case of anything happens on a production. So this is
Correct.
how the open
Exactly.
source works. Yeah. So you invest, you contribute, but for those who would like to grab it, they love the technology, but they would like to go with the maintenance and with the security part of they can always purchase and grab the professional version here.
Absolutely, yes, and this is how, like the big tech giants in the open source space have been doing their business for years, right? Like I don't want to call out like our competition here, but I'm pretty sure like whoever is watching this show knows what we're talking about. Like everyone knows what Linux distributions typically are, right? So this is basically the business model of Canonical. We are providing support for open source and extended security maintenance. Like this is the business model, while everything the technology remains free and will always be like that.
And this is when we started the discussion on the OpenInfra. You are, let's say, the huge part of the contribution, especially in the OpenStack world. So can you share with us some stats? Because from our last talk, you mentioned that base of the number of the developers, base of the contribution, you're one of the top, let's say, 5 choices, and the companies who invested actually in the OpenStack. Because I would like to emphasize here that the OpenStack community, without the contributors, without the sponsor, could have a much more worse, let's say, a lifetime than without. So it's a huge important that the OpenInfra and the community has the support from the biggest players. Did you grab these numbers? Found it?
Yes, I was able to find some numbers. So we are actually like one of the top 4 competitors, contributors to the OpenStack code base in the upstream, like since day 0 of the project, right? Or day 1. So we were in the community since the early beginnings. We've joined relatively yearly, and over years we've been doing obviously packaging for Ubuntu, because if you take a look at the stats, like according to the OpenStack user survey from 2022, 48% of OpenStack deployments actually run on Ubuntu, right? So those people are consuming the packages that we are producing in the upstream, and we've been producing for years. But we also invest like in the innovation, right? So obviously, OpenStack is kind of achieving this state of maturity these days, so that it is really comprehensive. It's versatile, right? Like you can use OpenStack for various types of use cases, and it just works, right? But there's still some innovation happening there, right? Like if you take a look at what we've been doing for the last couple of years with enabling, I know I'm going into a little bit technical details here, but basically enabling various types of acceleration devices in the OpenStack ecosystem, like DPUs, for example, data processing units. Like one of the things that Canonical has been working on extensively was to enable, an offload of network functions from OpenStack into this kind of acceleration devices, right? So it's not just like we do maintenance. We also invest in innovation, but we try to be very opinionated in terms of where it's worth to invest, because we are still relatively small type of a company. Like at the moment, we have more than 1,000 employees, and they're coming from various parts of the world, as I said, and we're growing, but we're still relatively small, right? Compared to other tech giants, if you think of it that way, right? Yes, we are one of the top 4 contributors in terms of the number of commits over years. We maintain packages in the upstream. We maintain the automation framework for OpenStack deployment based on our internal technologies that we use, which are also fully open source. And we invest in the innovation wherever we see a value for that, and wherever we see a business case for that, and wherever we think this is going to drive the adoption for OpenStack in the upcoming years.
My personal perception is that many of the tech giants right now, even if they already invested in the OpenStack, they right now I don't want to say that they forgetting what they already done for the community, but they have huge, they would like to huge push forward for the other technologies such as containerization, etc. So they even deprecated the existing worth of the OpenStack, and they just chasing something new, chasing the rabbit, especially in the containerization world. And I when we started this discussion on the OpenInfra in June this year, I was of course positively surprised that you still have lots of energy and lots of efforts and the people assigned to the project, and you would like to invest it more. So this is the key values why we actually will start to talk about the Sunbeam project, because you said about the first attempt. So it was early days of the OpenStack.
Yes.
The second phase when you joined the Canonical in 2016, but this year you announced something new called Sunbeam project. So
right.
let's deep dive and talk about the third attempt and why you as a Canonical still heavily invest in the OpenStack project and the community.
Sure. So let me start with trying to reply to what you've just said about containers and containerization and like, so well there's obviously like a big wave of containerization, containers, cloud native, Kubernetes. We've all heard those terms before, right? So after years of doing virtualization only, like the open source, like not just the open source community, the entire IT community has realized like there's a better way of doing things, right? And this totally makes sense because containers and cloud native applications bring us a lot of values, right, compared to the traditional virtualization, and especially like all of those legacy monolithic applications that we've been seeing for the last decades, let's say, right? However, if we take a look at how the reality looks like around us today, there are still a lot of companies who haven't even started the cloud migration, right? Like who haven't even started the digital transformation, right? So they're still like at the early beginning of the journey, right? In fact, like a lot of financial institutions, for example, like still run their systems on IBM mainframes, right? Like, and they're going to run them like that for years, right? So
They're still foothold of the monoliths, and they will
yes,
not replace whatever technology will propose. It's not easy changing. There are systems that design and written in early 90s or late 80s, and they still running on COBOL on the mainframe, etc.
Exactly, and it's always going to be like that, right? So the technology will keep evolving, and this is good, right? That like this is exactly how it should be, and there's nothing wrong with that. But let's don't forget about the reality, right? So the reality is that applications are a mix as of today, right? Like some companies, especially those who have like so-called greenfield projects, right? Like they have a budget to work on something brand new. They have dedicated teams of developers to come up with like completely new solutions. This is where we see a lot of containers, obviously, and this is where we see a lot of cloud native applications, and this is where Kubernetes takes precedence and is a kind of a de facto standard for implementing an infrastructure capable of running these kind of workloads, right? But in fact, like there's still a need for a traditional virtual machine workloads out there, and even like bare metal workloads. So this is where we see a lot of adoption for OpenStack, right? And I think the answer is simple, right? Like if you are not seeing a business case for OpenStack, we would not be investing in it, right? So there is a business case for it, right? Like people keep choosing OpenStack. They keep choosing OpenStack, and we see an adoption for OpenStack growing, not declining. If you watch the keynote from the OpenInfra Summit that was held in Vancouver this year, where we met, like during one of the keynotes, they were basically showing again some results from the OpenStack user survey from last
number
year.
of the cores, the usage,
Number of the
etc.
codes is exactly it's growing exponentially, right? So like it is contrary to whatever we're hearing about, OpenStack adoption declining or stalling or whatever. It's not like that. It's actually exponential, right? So we obviously continue investing in that, but this does not mean we're not looking into other technologies around us. Like as I said at the beginning, we're trying to take a holistic view across the entire spectrum of infrastructure, across the entire spectrum of open source, choose the best of breed technologies that could help us to build, a stable, trusted platform for running open source in the long term, right? So obviously Kubernetes is also there, and we focus on Kubernetes with the same energy as we focus on OpenStack. We have a dedicated Kubernetes engineering team. We also have our distributions of Kubernetes that are again suitable for production. So we invest in whatever makes sense. Kubernetes, as I said, is definitely becoming like the de facto standard for implementing infrastructure in the long run. Now, that doesn't mean like there's no space for something like OpenStack in this complex picture moving forward, because there is going to be a need for traditional virtual machine management, and there is going to be a need for traditional infrastructure as a service capabilities. No doubts here.
So let's talk about the Sunbeam here, and about your third attempt here, how it looks
Sure.
like, and what's the idea behind the scenes.
Absolutely. So just to briefly introduce Sunbeam to our audience, like as you mentioned, like this is a new project that we announced during the OpenInfra Summit Vancouver this year. It is 100% open source. It is actually hosted under the governance of the OpenInfra Foundation. So it is part of the OpenStack tree, right? And I think we can make an equal sign here is like Sunbeam means OpenStack, right? But what it is underneath and how did we come up with something like that? So as I told you before, right? Like as you've summarized, Paweł, like my first experience with OpenStack was like, oh, it's complex, right? It takes weeks to get it up and running, right? The second approach, when I joined Canonical, when I used OpenStack charms for the purpose of OpenStack deployment as a part of my onboarding, was that, well, it actually works and it's not that complex, right? Like we can tame that complexity, right? But when Canonical first launched its OpenStack distribution back in 2014, a lot of principles that we have right now did not exist that time. Like Kubernetes was not there. Well, or it was just launched, right? Like no one knew what Kubernetes is and how it's going to work, right? Snaps did not exist, right? So over years, obviously, the way we've been doing OpenStack has become a kind of old-fashioned, let's call it that way, right? Like The automation framework that we use, which basically helps you to automate everything from the ground up, like starting from pure bare metal up to applications, has been working quite well. But the underlying architecture for our OpenStack distribution, child OpenStack, has started causing some challenges even for ourselves, right? So just to give you an example, right? Like we actually operate OpenStack for our customers. We have a dedicated team that provides like fully managed services for our customers who want this kind of a service. Obviously, some of them operate it themselves, some of them choose us to operate, right? If you think about like typical challenges with OpenStack, such as upgrades, for example, how do you upgrade such a complex environment that consists, like tens of distributed applications, each of them having, its dependency on the other one, and how do we do that in an intelligent way, so that we can do it with no disruption in production? Like it's been causing issues, and that was coming from the fact, how do we what is the underlying architecture that we use for OpenStack? How do we package OpenStack on Ubuntu? Because in the current distribution that we have, everything is based on Debian packages, right? Also, one of the things that we've seen was that this initial adoption for OpenStack has remained a challenge, right? Because let's be frank, right? Like not everyone is a Linux expert, right? I know here in the room we probably have people who are passionate about the technology, right? Like so if they go to like a well documented product, they are able to get it up and running quickly. But let's think about like all of those people who have been using VMware for years, right? And as you said previously, to get started with VMware, it is relatively easy, right? So and those people don't have an experience with Linux. They don't have an experience with the Linux terminal. So this initial, this first initial experience was still a challenge. So
yeah, but this is the let's say we are ahead of Broadcom acquisition, so they saying that it will goes like 30th of October. So this is I'm not saying that VMware is going into the bad direction. With the time will show us what's going on, but I guess that lots of people knows that this investments in a VMware will I'm not saying drastically stop, but it definitely slowed down in the years. And also VMware has plenty of the different areas where they would like to grow. So this is a huge opportunity to get the percentage of this market from the other technologies such as OpenStack. And we know it that the simplicity is the key, not only for the OpenStack, for the Ubuntu, for the Storware, but for all of the vendors who are right now fighting against the competition. You need to provide the advanced system, secure system, and simplicity. I already built the strategy in a Storware called 4S. So simplicity, security, scalability, and scalability and scalability. I have forgot about the word scalability. So
4S, right?
Yeah, 4S. So I know how it's important these days to go into the enterprise and provide this 4S's, which sometimes they don't want to go in the same direction, because if you would like to be more secure, you need to do more. Simplicity not always equals with the security, for example, especially in the enterprise world. So I'm fully understand when you're saying that this still a challenge, but I'm guessing, and what I know, the Sunbeam has the idea behind the scenes about it.
this is exactly the case, right? So I was just trying to build a ground for that, right? Like knowing all those challenges and like acknowledging them as one of the vendors and as one of the contributors to the OpenStack in the upstream. 3 years ago, that was 3 years ago, we sat down and we like basically painted the vision for the future, right? Like and we're really excited. We're like after 3 years, like we've just made the first step towards this future, which is having an OpenStack that is consumable by human beings, like regular human beings, not just Linux geeks, like techie people, but actually people who have no previous experience with it, right? So and this is where the project Sunbeam comes into play, right? So this is a completely new way of doing OpenStack, because we obviously leverage on the years of experience we have in the OpenStack space here, and especially on the automation framework that we've been using previously, which I said like helps you to automate everything from the ground up, right? But at the same time, we use like a completely new cloud native architecture underneath, right? So basically, running all OpenStack services fully containerized, and this may sound like some projects from the past, like we all remember the project Airship, for example, which is like no longer developed, right? But we tried to make very smart decisions here and avoid like all of the mistakes from the past made by other community members, right? So with this new approach, right, like we make a clear distinction so that everything that needs an access to the hardware should not run on top of Kubernetes, right? Like there are other ways of containerizing applications that need an access to the underlying metal, right? And in Canonical world, like in Ubuntu world, those are snaps, right? So we make a very clear distinction. We run like the entire control plane on top of Kubernetes. We run the data plane on top of metal with snaps. We wrap all of those up with the automation framework that we have. And this basically helps us to fully decouple OpenStack from the underlying operating system, right? Like making it easily upgradable and also drastically lowering the entry barrier, right? Because in order to get started with OpenStack using the project Sunbeam, like you need to run just 5 commands, right? Like, and even with those 5 commands, you get your first virtual machine up and running there. So it's like revolutionary way of doing OpenStack, if you think of that way, right? Like it is this third experience, like on the journey with OpenStack that you can get, so that yes, it works, but it also works like as a step, right? Like you can get it up and running like during your lunch break, right? And even more importantly, when it comes to things like upgrades, they are relatively simple as well, right? Because all you need to do is like you refresh the container underneath or a snap, right? So it basically and you can benefit from things that Kubernetes brings, so that all the native Kubernetes principles, such as rolling updates or rollbacks or these kind of mechanisms, right? So there is like the fourth stage that we'd like to get here on that journey, and that will be like a completely new experience. I'm not sure how much time will we have to talk about that, but what we're trying to build here is like an autonomous private cloud, right? Like a cloud that can basically operate itself, right? So that would be like the fourth stage on that journey on OpenStack, from trying to get it working to just being able to install it easily and letting the cloud operate itself, right? Like that's a dream for the future, but that's also like a very solid vision that we have. And this is definitely in the direction that we are taking as a company. But before we get there, so one more word about Kubernetes, because I said the project Sunbeam uses Kubernetes underneath, and this is very much in line with, again, like what we're seeing happening, right? So as I said, a lot of those companies who have greenfield projects go with Kubernetes and containers and cloud native by default. we can let Kubernetes fill in that space, right? Basically, make it your starting point for everything. And if there is a need for just containers and cloud native, Kubernetes is sufficient. If it is not, let's just put OpenStack on the top and let it play like the role that it's best suited for, which is basically, providing management functions for traditional virtual machines and providing, the comprehensive infrastructure as a service capabilities with, things like load balancing, DNS as a service, all of the goodness that OpenStack has been providing us for years.
You think the Sunbeam will go into, let's say, what is the, let's say, best flavor of the customers or the partners? So who should start with the Sunbeam? Let's say comparing to the native or charm OpenStack from the Ubuntu. So how should I make a proper choice when I start in the journey?
Sure thing. So it all depends like what you're trying to achieve, basically, right? And what is your use case and what are you trying to build it for, right? Like if it's at the moment, Charmed OpenStack remains like the default distribution that we have because it has more features, it has more OpenStack services enabled, and it basically benefits from years of experience in the OpenStack that we have, right? But where the project Sunbeam is evolving is to become feature rich as well, and basically get to a point, right, like where we have like a full feature parity between Charmed OpenStack and Sunbeam, right? So at that point, we hope that could become a foundation for the future, and so that this is something that we'll start using by default in our deployments, right? But for now, you need to understand the dynamics. It's evolving quickly, right? So if I tell you right now, like it doesn't have those features, it doesn't mean like it won't have those features like in 3 months from now, because it's really evolving quickly, right? Like when we launched it in June, it had only key OpenStack services enabled, right? Like that, it was consisting of things like Keystone, Neutron, Nova, Glance, mostly it, right? As of today, we've enabled things like Octavia, we've enabled things like Designate, we've enabled things like Heat, for example, right? And we have a very aggressive roadmap moving forward to continue, evolving it towards achieving a full feature parity with Charmed OpenStack, right? But if you're wondering what to use today, I'd say the default choice would be still Charmed OpenStack, right? But this comes with its own with its limitations as well, right? Like again, as I said, what the project Sunbeam really brings is that how easily you can start your journey, and how easily this journey can look like moving forward, right? So I'd say, for testing and development, of course, but also for small scale cloud environments, I'd also say, for potential edge projects, I'd say as an extension to an OpenStack-based public cloud as well. If you think about, all of those companies who've built, an OpenStack-based public cloud, they need to provide some kind of an extension to their infrastructure in a similar way that Amazon is doing with things like Outposts, for example. So this is something where the project Sunbeam can fill in the gap as well.
Okay.
Basically being, like a OpenStack flavor with a minimal footprint, minimal resource consumption, something like a cloud in a box, basically, right?
You said about this fourth step. How you see the Sunbeam in the future. So how long the roadmap takes right now. Of course, if you can share with us, not details, but how you're planning this project for the next years.
Absolutely. So I obviously can't share like a detailed roadmap here, but I can try to paint a vision for you so that we all understand where we're heading with it, right? So as I said previously, like the goal for us is to build an autonomous private cloud, right? Like and we made it very clear when launching the project Sunbeam, so that this is what it's intended to solve in the long run, right? Like obviously there are some milestones that we need to achieve on that way first, right? So as we discussed, lowering an entry barrier, making it more lightweight, reducing the hardware footprint, simplifying the way the typical day two operations are handled. But the goal is way beyond that, right? So what we're investing right now, and where we're very close to get to, is that everything you do with OpenStack post the initial deployment can be fully automated, right? So that there's basically no need to run any manual steps. Like there's no need to touch a terminal on individual nodes in the cluster, on individual machines in a cluster, right? So that a human operator who's responsible for OpenStack operations can basically interact with an interface that allows him to talk to the cloud rather than individual nodes, right? So basically have this kind of an interface to the cloud where you can manually run certain primitives that will then be handled automatically, and we'll have that, like, the right logic implemented underneath to perform certain day two actions. This can be things like how to upgrade the cloud, how to back up the cloud. This can be things like how to renew certificates, right? Like those type of operations that you typically historically used to run manually through the terminal, right? One step forward is to turn the cloud into a system that is intelligent enough to be able to run those operations itself, right? Basically a cloud that can operate itself, an autonomous cloud, right? So this will obviously enforce us to introduce some AI ML staff to the project, basically learning from all the environments that we have an access to, see how the typical metrics that you can get from a complex environment like that look like, and what you can learn from those metrics, and basically train the model based on that so that the cloud could be able to take not just reactive but also proactive actions, right?
But what we can
Go ahead.
learn, it's actually my one of the next question, because I would like to come back to the community itself, the OpenStack community. So how you see the trends right now, because you've been in a community from the like you said, and as also Canonical, but also yourself from the day one, and how you see this community, let's say, evolving, and what will be the future of the OpenStack. Your personal thoughts right now, regarding your experience, what you see on the market as a Tytus, but also as a Canonical, as a part of the investments into this community, as a part of the OpenInfra.
Sure thing. So the community is obviously at an interesting stage, because like there's a lot of dynamics happening there, right? And we're living in interesting times in general, like given the current geopolitical circumstances. I sometimes have a feeling so that like this is kind of shifting towards communities like that as well, right? And you see various parts of community pulling into different directions, right? So what's been announced during the OpenInfra Summit Vancouver, for example, is like the OpenInfra Foundation moving forward is going to have like its own branches, one in Europe, the other one in Asia. it's going to set a foundation for solving some local challenges that the community is facing in these kind of regions. But let's just be clear with ourselves. Like it also means, like those will be shaping the vision and the future for the entire community in those regions, right? So I think we as an open source community, we have to do everything that we can just to mitigate the risk of defragmentation, right? Because this is the worst thing that could happen, and it's not just it does not apply just to the OpenInfra Foundation, but also other communities that are out there in the open source space, right? But at the same time, we see the community coming to the events like that, and there's been like a PTG project team gathering happening recently. So it kind of reassures that the community keeps working together. One interesting thing about OpenStack individually is that it is kind of reaching a point where it becomes really stable, and perhaps it does not
mature enough, we can say.
Mature
Yes?
enough, mature enough. Yeah, I think those are the right words, right? So yeah, it is becoming mature enough so that maybe it does not require as much participation from the community moving forward, right? This is like these days, after 13 years being with us, like it is not this kind of a technology that requires a lot of brainstorming, right? Like people, like individual developers need to sit together and think like how the user experience is going to look like, how to provide the right interactions between various projects. Like it's all set, right? Like it's all well established. It just works, right, these days. So perhaps we're just going to see OpenStack growing and its market penetration, increasing, and as we've seen that with the numbers of cores that are used in OpenStack environments, growing exponentially, while we like if the interest in events like that keeps decreasing, this is fine, right? Like there are more fancy things happening around us these days, and obviously 10 years ago OpenStack was this kind of a thing, so that if you were graduating from the university, you wanted to learn something brand new in tech, the OpenStack Summit was one of those places where you can learn, right? Like today there are other places like that. We've got KubeCon, and Kubernetes is obviously like one of the things like that, but
this
it
is a
is also
natural,
passing.
you have this maturity of the product. You reaching
Exactly,
the
yeah.
hype and it's decreasing. It's not meaning that the project is dead, but it means that they got some traction that is obviously spread around the world, and it's a time for some, let's say, add-ons or enhancement for the existing products. So for
Absolutely.
me, it's a natural way. We speak about the 14 years old project, and I started Storware 9 years ago, and I know that I also reached some level, but we are in the middle of this process. But it's not means that we are, let's say, changing the software drastically. We even need to a little bit slow down to make the other things going. Yeah, like scalability, like I said, scalability, security. So it's a natural way of, let's say, developing the product and the community, I guess.
It is a natural way of how the technology evolves, right? As you said, with the hype cycle, I even have a feeling that with Kubernetes, we've just passed this peak of inflated expectations. I think this is how it's called. So you're actually going to see more people complaining about Kubernetes in the following years, because like they start facing all the challenges with the platform once. If if they make their business decisions, if they invest in it heavily and like they run only Kubernetes is in production, right? Like you're now going to see those challenges coming, right? Like this is exactly what we've seen with OpenStack. But think about Linux, for example. Linux has been with us, for so many years, and it is not like one of those technologies that are exciting. It's just there, right? Like it's part of the stack, and everyone is using it, not even knowing that they're using it, because it runs like on, I don't know, like even if you're using like a Mac or a Windows desktop, that's fine. But at the same time, like it can run on your TV, or it can run on your coffee machine, or you're using some web applications that run on containers that use Linux underneath, right? Somewhere in the cloud, right? So it's just there, and we don't even know about that.
So this is we
OpenStack.
going. Yeah, sorry.
Just wanted to say
Just
OpenStack might evolve
finalize
towards
the
the same
sequence.
direction. Yeah.
So we need to close the session like in a few minutes. So last question to this: if we will meet in 10 years, and hopefully we'll meet, yeah, because we are still young fellows. I'm guessing, because we can always come back to this material, and this will be one of them, the funny part. When we will be from the OpenStack community, from the Canonical perspective, doesn't matter if we work, if I will be in a Storware or you will be in a Canonical, but let's say imagine where the OpenStack community will be in 10 years, as a product, as a community, as a traction maturity.
That's a very good question. I think, like if we get back to this material in 10 years from now, like we'll have a fun moment in our life, because predicting a future, especially in like tech, for 10 years, it's almost impossible. Like everyone knows that, but let's try, right?
That's why we want to try. That's why we want to try it. Yes, let's
give it a try. So what I think is going to happen is that we're going to see a consolidation progressing, and at the moment. So let's just take a look at what has happened for the last couple of years, right? Like when OpenStack was initially started, like it was about to support everything, right? You can run it on so many hypervisors. You can run so many SDN solutions underneath. You can run so many storage plugins and so on, right? Like these days, 99% of OpenStacks run on KVM. So we've concluded with the hypervisor, right? We're in a stage where we're about to conclude on the software-defined networking solution. And we believe OVN is going to be the way you do software-defined networking moving forward. It's also open source. So this is why I invest in it heavily. I think a similar thing is going to happen on the storage front. So we're going to see a consolidation progressing. And same will apply to various available methods to deploy and operate OpenStack. Whether it's going to be Sunbeam or whether this is going to be something else, call it Ansible, or there are other projects in the community that also look promising, the time will show. We obviously hope it's going to be Sunbeam because we believe we're making the right decisions in terms of what needs to be done, but the time will show. I keep my fingers crossed so that the same is going to happen on the backup and recovery front, for example. So again, we'll see in 10 years.
I'm guessing that in 10 years we will be not only choice but only right choice. But of course, also our investment in the OpenStack community will show us the path. What I see that if we put a lot of effort into the community and in the product itself, it pays off from the numbers of the new projects that we have worldwide. It's not the easiest path, but definitely it's worth it. This is also in our DNA. We started from the KVM, and we love the real alternative for the virtualization, not from the biggest players such as VMware and Hyper-V. I don't want to, we also have a support for them, but we are, keep fingers crossed for the KVM community in every flavor and where it's possible. Okay, Tytus. So we are just close 1 hour session. I told you that it will be fast because both of us are talky guys. I hope it's not the last session. So we thank you for taking the invitation from our side. Hope we will see each other in the future. We started with the Canonical, Charm, OpenStack, and the project called Sunbeam. For all of you who haven't heard it before, or you didn't even know that the Ubuntu equals the Canonical, I encourage you to just go on a Canonical website, find the information regarding the OpenStack, the Ubuntu, or the project Sunbeam. Just download it and dare to test it. And believe me, you will be surprised how many works Canonical folks did in the last years to make your life easier. So, like I said, worth it. Play with it. And if you will have any questions regarding the future of the OpenStack, Tytus, as a product manager of the OpenStack, is the right choice to catch him up and ask the several questions. You can leave the question on a live. You can leave the questions if you're right now watching us on a YouTube after a while. So no worries. We'll try with Tytus to grab all of the questions and answer in an ASAP mode. And also, if you join through the LinkedIn, you're supposed to see the Tytus LinkedIn profiles. So if you're interested in this aspect, just I encourage you to invite myself or Tytus to the network. I'm not saying that Tytus will accept it, but you can always try. I will. Tytus, thank you. Anything else you would like to add, my friend?
Not at all. I think we've got enough time to talk about OpenStack and Sunbeam and Canonical and the role we both play in the community. So thank you very much for inviting me here. It's been a pleasure. Let's stay in touch.
Great. Have a great Friday for all of the audience, and stay safe, and see you on the next Backupmonster Show episodes. Bye-bye.
Have a good Friday, all.